So you know those black and white circular spiraling things? They're referred to as illusions. You know, you stare at them for a prolonged period of time, and whenever you start to look at anything else, whatever else you look at looks strange, right? It's like moving in different ways and everything. The more I sit with trauma, the more I realize how much it's like illusions. Not in the sense that trauma is not real, because it's very real, right? We live our lives oftentimes based in trauma responses and, pattern repetition and all that stuff. Repetition compulsion. Playing out things over and over again that relate to childhood. Something maybe dysfunctional that we learned in childhood, right? The more I look at trauma, the more I look at my own trauma, the more I think about illusion, because a majority of what I've experienced in life actually has to do with pattern repetition and trauma responses. And not that trauma is not real, because trauma is very real, but I look at it and I'm like, oh, I'm living an illusion, in the sense that more so what I'm doing is not really like the best that I could be doing for myself, right? Trauma shows us that we're just doing things from a place of comfort and familiarity, right? And it's not until we awaken, or I should say it's only until we awaken from what it is that messed us up, right? The trauma and everything, that we actually start to look at things differently from how we previously looked at them. And that's why I think that there's so much illusion there, because you know, think about that black and white spiraling circle, right? It's got you sucked into an idea, right? And it's only when you open your eyes to the reality of what's going on that you realize, oh, I was just plugged into the same thing that was familiar from childhood, right? Maybe, for instance, you learned to be overly responsible in childhood, and therefore you actually didn't get the opportunity to play and explore and to learn about yourself and to figure out what it is that you're actually interested in, right? And instead, you were just rushed into a life of being overly responsible, right? And as you grow, you continue to live that way, right? But then, when you actually start to explore yourself, you look at yourself, you discover that you were actually kind of just like pushed into this lifestyle of being overly responsible, and you never really got to explore and learn about yourself, right? You missed out on childhood, really. Instead, maybe you were made to manage a parent's emotions, right? You were conditioned into being the emotional container, right? Maybe you were pushed to do adult activities. When I say activities, I more so mean like, responsibilities, right, around the house and everything, instead of just really actually having your own time to learn about yourself and to explore and stuff. Trauma leads, in my opinion, based on my experiences, trauma leads people until they awaken from it to kind of live illusory lives, because this is the craziest thing about childhood, is that what you learn in childhood really sticks to you. It really does. It really leads you to just that's just the way that it is. Like, whatever it is that is learned in childhood really sticks with you. That there's really nothing else to be said. I'm sure that there are other things to say, but what you learn in childhood really sticks with you. And for many people, it can be very hard to, unimprint that. It's like when you see, the what is it, that really hot thing pressed on like an animal, right? It leaves a mark. What is learned in childhood really leaves a mark, and unlearning all of that stuff can be very challenging. But to the extent that trauma is like an illusion, I guess I should say it in the sense that what is learned in childhood, right? Depending on what is learned. If you learn over responsibility, right? That you need to manage a parent's emotions. If you need to be the caretaker, if you need to, you're the oldest one, but you're really not that old. You're still like a teenager. You're like a kid, but everyone else is younger than you, and you were taught that you are now responsible to take care of the other kids around you. You learn over responsibility. By the way, you're not responsible for taking care of the other kids around you. If your parents had a lot of kids, it was their choice to have a lot of kids, but it's not your responsibility to take care of the other kids. It's your responsibility to be a kid, and you're actually being overly responsible. But now you're learning that over responsibility, and that's stressing you out. But that is what actually ends up being repeated later on in life, and then you learn to manage everyone else around you, and you take on responsibility that's not yours, and you neglect play early on in life. It's not that you neglect play, it's that you just didn't get to have that. And then instead you end up later on in life with anxiety and depression because you just didn't get to have your childhood, right? It's crazy when I look at this, but really, like, trauma, it leads people to live illusions because it leads people to live in ways that is comfortable and familiar to them from early on in life. And until you awaken from that and realize, oh wow, all of these people managing their emotions, making sure that they do what they need to do, that's not my responsibility. Right? And then you start to take your focus, awareness, and energy back to yourself and into your body. And instead of being paralyzed by so much anxiety and depression because you feel overly responsible, which you're not, you just learned that in childhood, you really start to take yourself back. You start to take yourself back, and you start to awaken from the spiraling circle of black and white that makes everything look distorted. Being overly responsible, or feeling like you need to be overly responsible or feeling like you need to be responsible for everyone else, for starters, it's not true. So therefore, it's pretty much illusory, right? This is why I talk about this thing and, this spiraling circle being an illusion, right? It's just not true. So this is why awakening from trauma is kind of like awakening from an illusion. You're awakening from over responsibility. You're awakening from a trauma response. You're awakening from repeating patterns that you never really needed to have in your life before. This stuff is all real, but I recognize it as kind of like I recognize healing as like awakening from illusions. Because you were taught a certain way of living in life that was actually not healthy, and it was not your way. It was not your responsibility to learn this way of living. And I just think it's very interesting to look at it that way.